And hopefully we have more than a couple show and tells or tell and tells.
Tell and tell.
Yeah, if you have a story that you don't have anything to show, but it's a story you'd like to share, then it would be a tell and tell.
Should it be a tell and show?
I'm trapped.
But I will start, and we all know that nuts are seeds of a plant. How big do you think the biggest seed in the world is? Like this, like this, like this. But how
Bigger.
big?
Bigger.
Coconut?
Did you say coconut? Will it fit in your bag?
Yeah.
You're close. Closest.
Seems like I resonate with
What did
something.
you say?
Kathy, will it fit in your bag?
It fits in my bag, yes, but just barely.
I forgot, but I know there's something
Uh,
called
It is called coco de mer or sea coconut, and it does grow on a palm tree like coconuts. And it is only native to a very small group of islands in the Indian Ocean. So until the Europeans were doing a lot of exploring, they had no idea where it came from. And there were a lot of stories and legends made up about it because just like regular coconuts, there would be times when one would drop off into the salt water and go with the currents and the wind. And because of its size, one of the stories was that it grew on the bottom of the ocean. But there were a lot of other stories which I have not investigated because, well, the coco de mer is kind of a strange shaped one as well. And it is very big. The one I have was made into a box. The insides were scooped out. It was dried. Hinges were put on it. The hinges are broken, so the lid does not fit well now. But it is definitely not the size you would think of for a seed.
Wow.
That's cool.
That is
It looks almost like a hoof. You know,
It does.
yeah.
And it was made so that it would open up like that with the hinges, but the hinges are broken. That's what the inside of it looks like when everything's scooped out.
Oh my goodness.
Like a pair of slippers too.
Yeah.
Just like that.
Dutch clogs or whatever.
Well, legends were not about it looking like a pair of shoes.
Oh, looks like
I don't understand.
No, it wasn't.
No?
It's looking at the back side.
ah.
Oh, I could say front side too.
And of course, it was supposed to be of a woman.
Probably like in front of Sweets the other night.
So, but it's not that heavy at this point with everything scooped out and dried, but at some point, it was light enough and buoyant enough that it would float in the sea, but it was a lot heavier than it is now. But
That is so
Interesting.
cool.
That's
It's on- the
amazing.
stem was up on the, oh, I see, okay, a bit of a stem, right.
I'm not sure that you need to look, honey.
Oh my word.
What did you say?
Because he said totally not even what it is.
Yeah.
I think it's amazing.
so,
It is.
yeah.
Did your dad bring
Well,
that here?
Yes, yes. My father got it when he was going to sea. And he probably got it either when he was in India or in Africa because of the way the currents are in the Indian Ocean.
Who did you say gave it to him before?
My dad brought it home when he was going to sea. So,
Never heard of them.
I've never
That's
seen them.
amazing.
No.
I'm
um,
surprised.
they are a lot bigger than most people would expect a seed to be, but that is what they are. They're the seed of the coco de mer tree.
Now, do you know if they came with the husk as well, like a regular
I
coconut
have
or?
no idea if it did, because when Dad got it, it was like this, it had already been cleaned out and cleaned off, and made into a box, so.
That's cool, and it lasts this
I
long.
wonder how they sprout into a new tree. Or is it like coconuts, need a road, need someone to eat them, eat through the outside?
I don't know, and you would think if they normally sprouted when they came up on a beach, people would have known that they were a tree similar to a coconut, but from what I read,
Yeah.
people did not realize that.
They might need some animal to eat the truth through the husk.
Yeah, and
If they wouldn't do, maybe it's been in the ocean for a year.
even with everything cleaned out, it's still
Yeah.
fairly thick and it's very hard,
Wow.
Quite amazing.
so.
Never heard of it.
You know,
That'd be
if the
strange.
inside is edible?
I have no idea.
I'll have to look those up.
Now
Yeah,
we're gonna have to
yeah,
research
really
it.
bad.
Let's take a
Indian
field
coconut.
trip
It's-
to the island.
It's one of the many things that I grew up with and didn't think that much about because Dad was going to sea for 10 years and a lot of it was Asia and Africa.
Mhm.
And we had all kinds of things in the house that were like back at the time of sea captains.
It is edible, and it's also illegal to harvest them anymore.
Just
I'm not
They're-
surprised
they're
because
in-
it's such a small area
They're
that's,
an endangered species.
yeah,
Huh?
only a few islands in the whole
I
world.
can't pronounce this, it's Seychelles,
Seychelles.
government.
Oh, the Seychelles in Deutsch.
Can you imagine being
No, you know.
stranded on an island and you got a bunch of
Seychelles.
those and nothing to break it
Seychelles.
open?
The government controls the harvest.
Well, that's when you open,
It's okay.
that's when you,
Yeah.
that's when you open up the FedEx package and take out the ice skates.
Say how they
I don't know exactly, where they like Indian Ocean, I think.
They're in the Indian Ocean, and about, looking at the map, about equidistant from India and the African coast.
Yeah.
But, there are a number of things that Dad brought home, this was in the 30s, or very early 40s, that are now illegal to have.
Like ivory.
Yeah, like ivory.
Yeah. I
Um,
have some ivory.
Yeah, and one thing that has been disposed of now is a dik-dik skin. Dik-dik. They're the smallest antelope in the world. D-I-K.
I've heard of them.
And I've actually seen one once, tried to get a picture of it and it hid in the foliage. But that was hanging on the wall for years until it started shedding. And a stuffed sea turtle, which is probably illegal to have
Yeah.
now. But they are back, they were bought back before they were illegal. And I can prove when Dad was going to sea, but I still probably am not able to do anything except give them away.
They're a collector's item. They are anywhere from $4,000 to $400.
These?
But you had more nuts, huh?
There's your retirement right there. Your cruise.
Pack it up now, I don't want
Okay.
anybody to say
What?
They're a member of the palm family.
Interesting conversation pieces.
Yes. But I will leave it out, I won't put it back in the bag, so when we're having refreshments, if anyone wants a closer look, they can have a closer look.
You can say you touched it.
Yeah.
Really? Just look, no touch.
That.
Well, it's pretty sturdy except
Yeah.
for where the hinges are broken.
Well, in case you wanna sell it.
Oh.
But at least no elephant got killed or whatever. That was probably the only reason they stopped the ivory.
Yeah, because they kill them.
I mean,
Part of it,
horrible
yeah.
stories, horrible. To what, 20 years ago at
Yeah.
times?
Yeah.
Illegal as it was. So if it's illegal to get this, if we found one, we could take one.
Well, if you found one on the beach, you would not be taking it from
No.
the harvest area, but
I wouldn't want to be caught at the airport.
it would
TSA.
probably be
You out.
unusual.
I know. You don't do any funny stuff at airports anymore.
Sure.
Debbie, I can see that you brought in something.
Is that okay for me to?
Okay. I would like to introduce you to my great grandmother, Florence Blavel Pulsifer, and her sister, my great great aunt Lillian. And this is the silhouette of Lillian and Florence
Can you show Sarah?
When you're done.
Blavel, done during Lillian's tour of Europe in 1891 as an opera diva of renown at the Eiffel Tower, July 10th of 1891.
Wow.
And that's the silhouette of the two sisters, and they traveled. She went to Europe. She started out, Lillian started out as a violinist, and her voice was so incredible. They both sang opera, and she ended up being very, very famous, and I'll show you her picture in a moment. And her sister, my great grandmother, would travel with her and play the piano and sing with her. And in later life, when after that was over, Lillian was caught in, I think it's Switzerland in the First War, in the Alps singing. Later, she taught opera in 5 languages, my great grandmother.
Oh, neat.
And
Very neat.
so I donated her entire collection. My great uncle collected his aunts. He was very fascinated with her, of course, his mother's sister. And I donated everything to the Portland, down in Portland, the Maine Historical Society. And just now, that was done like 4 or 5 years ago, they did a piece and featured her as one of the 5 opera singers of Maine. And she was really from Brooklyn, New York, originally. But this is, and I say,
I love that thing.
she hangs in my living room, and I said, well, I know where I got my nose from. And you will see she's wearing a number of medals. She is the only American-speaking person to ever receive the Medal of St. Cecilia, and her name is carved in Rome. And she also was a favorite of the Queen of London, England, and she was requested to sing at her funeral. And I actually, Queen Victoria. Yeah, and I actually have the gilded invitation for the funeral.
Oh, wow.
But if you want to hear just brief, I'll try to do it very quickly, and of course my eyes are
Take your time.
still.
Ask me to do it.
So this was written by Karl Pulsifer, who is my great uncle, my grandmother's brother. Lillian Blavel in Maine. So I'm just mostly going to do Maine because my grandmother, my great grandmother, wrote a book about her, and it didn't get published. It's copyrighted, but she copyrighted in 1940, and then what happened? World War II, and never got published. But I have a copy of it, the pages. So I'm trying to get it published.
Nice.
Lillian was well known and loved in, okay, I'm gonna have to hold this close, in Maine, where she often vacationed and sang in numerous concerts in the state in the late 1890s and early 1900s. She took part in several of the Maine music festivals at Portland, Bangor, I never realized this one, Lewiston, and Belfast. The Belfast Opera House. Under the supervision of Maine's noted conductor William Chapman, and became known, I'm not gonna have to do this, of Maine's favorite prima donna anyway. She performed in many places, you will see. She did a benefit for the Bangor Opera House, the Bangor Auditorium, excuse me. And she also did Longfellows. Okay. While sharing concerts in Portland in 1897, she found out that the Henry Wadsworth Longfellow's home in Portland was going to be auctioned off because they couldn't afford to fix it up. So she decided, she immediately offered her services and the entire proceeds of a concert to help defer the sale. So she did this performance. All the money went to buying the Longfellow House, which is now the Historical Society. Why I donated the entire collection there is she saved that house that the Historical Society is now attached to, even though that is an ugly building compared to the house, if you've ever gone through it. And I've gone through it, and because Longfellow was my relative too. Wordsworth Longfellow and Wordsworth and Boswells, but anyway. And then she heard about performing in Bangor. The auditorium had a $6,000 debt, and she decided she would go there and perform. And I need to find out, because she went up the river and performed in Bangor. Can you read it? I had my eyes done, so.
Another of Lillian Blobelt's many acts of charity, and again in Maine, concerns the concert in which she appeared as guest soloist in Bangor in 1900, giving her proceeds to aid in erasing the debt on the Bangor Auditorium. The citizens of Bangor were overcome at her generosity and the beauty of her singing performance, and her praise was on every lip.
And then she vacationed in Maine, and I know the story, so I don't have to read it, but she, her family came to Liberty, and they stayed in a farm on Georges Lake, and eventually they bought a farm on the hill, which my ancestors still own. The Taylors now own it. And she would come in with all her trunks and everything brought in, and the town would go crazy because she had arrived. And she would stand on the hillside. I actually gone there and stood, and Widow's Rock is there, and stood on the hill, and she would throw her voice, because they didn't have amplification then, and she would throw her voice across St. George Lake, and the people in Liberty would come out of their homes and their businesses and stand in the street and listen to her, because it would carry that far. And it's quite the story. So the arrival of the prima donna at Liberty for her vacation of 2 or 3 weeks was always the great local event of the year. And the last one was, she was at the Great Festival. This isn't in Maine, but she'd done the benefit for the Longfellow House. She'd done the one at the Bangor Auditorium. But this is about her being can you read this one? I'm amazed by the amount of people.
The Great Handel Festival of something 100 that's wiped out.
Yep.
This was the voice that so astounded Lillian's friends and fellow musicians at the Great Crystal Palace, London, in June of 1900. She had the honor of being chosen guest soloist for the Great Handel Festival of that year, with a vast audience of 19,000, a chorus of 5,000 singers, and a mighty orchestra. Lillian had to marshal all her vocal powers to meet the challenge. Her voice rose above the vast assemblage of people and the massive volume of sound from orchestra and chorus, and could be clearly heard floating separately above all as a distinct entity of pure sound. Those in attendance that day were astonished at Lillian's incredible display of sheer vocal power and at the grandeur and beauty of its effect. Lillian was to prove on numerous occasions throughout her career that when conditions demanded it, she could increase the volume of her voice to an amazing degree, far beyond her normal singing style in concert, and this without any detriment to its quality.
Wow, that's amazing. So
She's on
That's
YouTube,
so
by the way.
yes, if you Google Lillian Blauvelt, you'll
Yeah.
find it. And the Blauvelt family, actually, I can believe it, still does opera family reunions in Italy today,
Neat.
which is amazing to me. And
Can you imagine traveling there, eating good and have?
I would love to.
She actually was quite beautiful. I mean, for some of those earlier pictures
Yes, she
of
gorgeous.
women that I
Oh,
would
she
wanna
was
meet in
gorgeous,
our
and
gallery.
that's why my grandmother, my great grandmother wasn't as beautiful. She was very distinguished and gorgeous in her
Yeah.
gowns,
Yeah.
but she was well liked because she was beautiful. I mean, her first husband, she was 16. I think she had 3 or 4 husbands, but she went there with him because he was the conductor, and she went there to study and perform in Europe. And the stories are just amazing of how she would, they'd have these respites and they go to these salt pools and rest for 2 months after your voice to calm it down. And she would see the sheik coming in and this and that. It was just a whole different world. And it was amazing. But she started studying in Brooklyn, and her mother was from Wales. And she was a singer too, but in Wales in that period, you notice that the opera were all men, and they dressed up as women. Women were not allowed to sing. And so when she came to America, Elizabeth Jones was her maiden name, and she wanted better for her daughters. So she had them, she married a very wealthy Peter Blauvelt, and she made sure they got an education and they became her dream fulfilled. And she actually took something about Elizabeth going on the boat across the ocean back to Wales took 3 months with an infant, things like that. The stories are amazing. So
I loved
heritage.
it. I followed, there was a time we were riding back and forth, and I think I was actually in Germany when I found the YouTube,
Yes.
wasn't it? Yeah.
Yeah.
And I was amazed, so I listened to this and I said, this is actually crazy. We're talking about Maine, right?
Yeah.
We're talking about, remote St. George Lake and, all this. And every time I think about it, or your Widow's Rock, right? You're not telling the whole story, I can see it.
But Alfred Pulsifer was a captain
Yeah.
in the Civil War. That's the other whole story. I shared one other time.
Yeah.
But that would have been her father, right?
Yeah. She was the daughter.
Florence's
It was not.
Florence's husband's father.
Yeah.
Right. And so he met a Morrill girl had visited her uncle in New York, and she had a friend from Morrill. And so his friend they both married Morrill girls. And Mr. Johnson came to Liberty and opened up a store and a post office. Well, he had saved Johnson in the Civil War. The whole battalion had arrived to save him. And so he would come every summer, bring his wife back to visit her family in Morrill on the lake, and see Johnson, and she would visit her friend that was married. It was just amazing how they ended up here. It really is. But I guess a lot of professors and other people, they came here. And Alfred considered it more his home than New York.
Yeah, but you know more about Bar Harbor or Belfast, maybe. All these fancy places. When we got into that, I was really amazed.
Yeah. Well, the
And
Belfast
I wonder
Opera
how much-
House. Has anybody done the research? I have to go over and do some more history.
Probably Megan has, Megan Panat.
Because I went to the Historical Society and could find little to nothing. So I said, that doesn't make sense. But when I contacted the Maine Historical, they had one picture of her. And they didn't know anything about her. So I met with the Opera of Maine, and they said that I should put her collection there because they could protect it. So, you know, my log cabin doesn't burn down and everything's there. So there are articles, there are programs, performances, the people she performed with. And she ended up dying in Chicago, and she's buried in a monastery. And he was a famous conductor, and that's where she finished her career.
What was her age when she passed away?
I think 80s.
Yeah.
I'd have to look. I'd have to look back. But there's a whole entire book about her. And then there needs to be a sequel.
No, it is a very interesting
Yeah.
story.
It is amazing.
When I read this about Queen Victoria, I thought, oh my God, this is
Well, because
1900
Florence lived in Belfast, and Charles, they owned, is it the island in St. George's Lake? They owned that, and they had a summer cottage on it. So the sister was Edna, and she married a tailor who was an art professor. So he's the one that was the artist, my Uncle Carl. And he learned it from his uncle, who was a professor at Yale, art professor. So it's so weird how this all comes about.
I love it, yeah.
Only because my father came home to see my grandmother met my mother. And he threw the mail out from the other boyfriend. He was in the service, and my mother said, he came back with a ring, and I shouldn't tell that story, you probably still recording.
Oh, yeah.
You can. It's all right.
He went off to the service, and he was crazy about my mom, and she never got any letters from him. Well, she met my dad, who was home to see his mother before her heart surgery.
Who was your mother?
Joan Thompson Dunbar. Yeah, she was a twin, Jean Woods. And anyway, she said, he came home with the engagement ring. He said, I'm here to marry you. And she said, you never wrote me. He said, yes, I did, all the time. My father said, well, I might have snuck down when you were working at Wars and maybe took the letters out of the mailbox.
So it was known to happen.
It was, because he loved her and he wanted to marry her.
And the
That's
fathers didn't want them to be married, so they would do something to.
Well, he went to a
I do.
private school in Massachusetts, and he could swim back and forth from the mainland to the island and back at George's Lake, so he was pretty dashing, you know. Maine girls, they just get swayed. And out-of-state boys, because the Borough girls too. Right.
First there was something about, I actually thought you said a moral girl. What day is this today? And then
That's what I thought when she said that.
Oh, no,
Of course.
M-O-R-I.
But I know sometimes this
Scheibels,
is
the
the
Scheibels
German
family.
thinking. She also said he was a tailor. So then I figured out his name must have been Taylor.
It was
And
Taylor.
but this is the kind of thing where I
Edwin
stall
Taylor.
sometimes, and I have to really think. It's a different way of
Well,
saying.
you can look at it both ways, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
She was just down visiting her uncle in Brooklyn, you know. And I think he was in his late 30s when she married him. So. And they had 2 kids. So, and that's how the story happens, and that's why I'm here.
Yeah, right.
Great story.
We are all grateful. I love those stories.
I'm glad Elizabeth came across the ocean to America and
That's
shared
really
her
cool.
talents. Huh?
Yes.
It's awesome.
It's really neat.
It's an awesome story.
Quite the story.
Beautiful girl.
Nice stories.
Yeah, amazing.
Two good things so far. Amazing.
Do we
Yeah.
have
Debbie
any
just-
more?
I have stuff, but
No one wants to follow that.
Oh, I'm sorry.
my bag's over there behind Marsha. I wasn't sure how to.
She's gonna get it for you.
Do you want to record, Helu?
I could.
Or you can maybe set it on the table. Unless you don't want me on camera. Last time was kind of weird.
It was.
It was.
Do you want it over there?
Yeah.
Okay.
I didn't even know.
I'll grab it. It's a lot.
There you go.
Yeah, I was just,
So, this is kind of different, but I had a couple different things I was thinking about presenting on today, but
do it like this
sorry,
too.
everybody.
I don't think so.
So,
Pretty well filtered.
I inherited a
And you can.
record collection. Actually, I did bring over, I can pass these around. But I inherited a record collection when I turned 18 years old from my dad, and my dad and I had collected a lot of them together. He always told me I'd get them, but I didn't know how old I was gonna be. But so this is a controversial record.
Oh, you see, now I do have to come.
Yeah, that one's.
So, my father became interested in the Beatles when he was hospitalized. He was hospitalized often, but I think he was 8 years old. And he was at St. Joseph's Hospital in Bangor. And during his stay, he bunked with a colored guy that taught him about the Beatles and told him about the Beatles. And so this would have been, I believe, in 1968, 1969 when he bunked with this guy that he really liked and enjoyed. And they had a couple things in common. They liked baseball, but he set a fire under my father to get into music and enjoy the Beatles. So,
Can you turn that picture?
That was a very limited release in Great Britain.
It was.
It was never released here in
So-
the States, from
so
my understanding.
no, this one was never released in Great Britain. Actually, I have a lot of facts about it, but this specific one was never released in the UK.
Oh, I thought it was.
No, so a lot of times when you speak about this album with somebody from the UK, they don't know a whole lot about it, but I'll tell you some about it. And if you want to pass it around, you can. But I have also other copies of, I have like probably 3 more copies of these at my house. So, basically that one is a, not stereo, but mono. And they were coming out with stereo copies right around that time of music, and the stereo copy of that record is the more rare one. But you can see some of them are torn at the edges because I'll explain why, and you guys probably know why. But I have like 3 or 4 more copies of that at home. I have multiple. I probably have at least 600 records at my house. And most of them are of the Beatles. I have pretty much most things between the 60s and like the early 90s. And the Beatle ones and the solo artists of the Beatles, I have multiple copies of each because they had mistypes on them. They had just different things that made them more valuable. So, and this is my dad too. He was he was probably like 14 years old here, and this is in front of my grandparents' house in Bradley, and these are his band members that he continued to play with most of his life.
Oh, nice.
So, sorry guys.
What does that bring back memories?
Yeah, he's the one in the far left corner. So, this record was released in the US and Canada in June 15th of 1966. And it was the 12th album that they had with Capitol Records. And it was recorded in London, England, and by the producer, George Martin. So, controversy for sure. I mean, you can see what the actual record looked like. So it was known as the butcher sleeve or the butcher cover. And there was a lot of interpretations on how it came about. One interpretation, and this is what the Beatles kind of insisted, was it was a statement against the Vietnam War. And some interpret it as the Beatles, basically, they were pissed off at the, excuse my language, at the record companies in America, because basically they said that they butchered their albums. Basically some of the songs on that record were from prior releases or prior singles, and some of them were from records that would be released after that one. So they kind of put them all together in a weird way. And another reason was basically the American record labels, you could have up to 14 songs on a record, and usually they put about 9 or 10 on a record, unlike over in the UK. So like Martin and the Beatles were pretty upset by this, because they put a lot of care and strategy basically into their albums and how they sounded and how they kind of blended together in the theme of them. So they didn't really like the American record companies, but they were huge over here. Another reason, so basically some of the songs were from the Help record, so Yesterday and Act Naturally. Some of them were from Rubber Soul, so 9 months prior was the Help record coming out. Rubber Soul was from, like, it says February of 1966. Nowhere Man, What Goes On, Drive My Car, and If I Needed Somebody was from that record on this one as well. In December of 1965, which was the year prior, the singles Day Tripper, We Can Work It Out were on that record as well. And the not yet released Revolver record, I'm Only Sleeping, and Dr. Robert and Your Bird Can Sing. So those were Lennon leads, and those were also on that record, and Revolver came out later that year, I believe. So, another interpretation of that record cover was the raw meat and dismembered limbs symbolized the violence behind Beatlemania and what the fans would do to them without the presence of their heavy security at their concerts. So that was one interpretation. And then another interpretation was basically it was motivated by boredom and resentment, dark humor, experimental artwork, pop art, and satire. So I believe before this record was released, they were in London, and they were kind of isolated for 3 months prior to the release of the record. And they were supposed to have some art exhibit over there that featured that picture, as well as some others that aren't released over here, but one of them had like a sausage link, which would represent a umbilical cord, and there was false teeth in some of the pictures, and eyes, and things of that nature. So there was supposed to be some part of some art exhibit over there, which never happened.
I never remember any of
Really?
of the weird I'm the Beatles fan here. Never was there. You know, they were always neat, nice. So all this is totally new to me.
Yeah, it's interesting. And another, in some of the other pictures, they were going to depict John, his face like in wood grain, basically depicting him as an idol, which this was kind of how they didn't want to be felt in that sense, but it was kind of like the whole resentment thing and the dark humor and everything behind
Very
it.
strange, yeah.
So I haven't seen any of those pictures. I don't know if they exist, but like that was supposed to be part of some gallery exhibit that I don't think ever happened. But so basically the Capitol Records president at the time was Alan Livingston. He hated the cover. But the art director at Capitol loved it and prepared it to look like a painting on canvas. So if you look at the cover, that's what it kind of looks like, the original butcher sleeve cover. So 750,000 of those were printed, of the original butcher sleeve, and they were to be released on June 15th of 1966. And prior to the release, there was 60,000 copies, and they were sent to the radio stations, to the print media, so the news, and the Capitol branch offices for marketing purposes. So they got the copies before everybody else did. And I guess the disc jockeys were outraged of the cover. The retailers found them distasteful and they didn't want to stock them in their stores. And basically the response to the image caused Capitol to immediately recall the records. And so on June 10th, they created Operation Retrieve to replace the offensive image and replace the posters that were inserts in the records. And this cost Capitol Records $250,000. So this was like, I wrote down about $2.4 million of what it would cost today for this situation to happen. And basically it wiped out Capitol Records' initial profits from releasing the record. So they recovered the copies, they were sent back to Capitol, leading to the rarity among collectors of that album. So obviously they didn't get all of them back. So some of the originals had, they had pasted the trunk image, which is on the white yesterday and today. So it was like a C trunk, and this caused the trend of people stripping back the pasted covers of it, hoping that they had a copy of the band Butcher Sleeve. So you can see on some of those copies, they're kind of torn on the edges and the corners. I think I remember my father doing one of them himself. Basically, to know if you have one, under where it says yesterday on the white cover version, between that and Ringo, like where it says yesterday, you can see on the Butcher Sleeve one, there's a triangle on Ringo where he has the white doctor type coat, butcher coat, and that black triangle would kind of peek through the white. So apparently my father thought he saw that, and he fiddled with one of them. So, but despite the recall, some of the distributors had already delivered the stock to the retailers before they should have, and the copies were sold to customers in line for the June 15th release date. So
they were sold the same day probably.
right, they were like, it was like Black Friday to these people.
We were all waiting for the next album to come out, right?
The first backlash was reported on June 25th issue of Billboard magazine, and about the original cover there. And I have some responses from the Beatles here about the critics. Lennon's response was, he said, this was as relevant as Vietnam. If the public can accept something as cruel as war, they can accept this cover. McCartney's response was, he called the critics soft. And Harrison, his response to it was gross and stupid, so he apparently didn't like it to begin with.
Yeah.
And George Martin, which was the producer back then, he said it was disgusting and of poor taste. It suggested that they were madmen, which they were, but not in that way. So by July 8th, which was less than a month later, that record sold over 1 million copies. And it topped the Billboard US charts on July 30th of that year, and it was #1 for 5 weeks. And during that time, the Beatles played their final concert tour in the US and Canada. And later, Lennon described the replacement as an awful looking photo of us looking just as deadbeat, but supposed to be as happy-go-lucky foursome. So this was kind of talking about the new cover. So it's kind of interesting. So basically, I mentioned the stereo copy was more rare of this record. I believe it was about 75% of the mono versus about 25% to the stereo. So, and there's 3 different states to this record. The first state was the ones that had never had the trunk cover pasted on them, and they're very rare. Like, they're very hard to come by. So those rake in a ton of cash. The second state are the paste over ones that have not been peeled. So basically, they're becoming the more valuable and rare ones. They're not as rare as the first state, but as I mentioned, a lot of people, once they got their hands on one, they were peeling them off. And people still do it today because they want to know if they have the real butcher sleeve. So still happens. And then the third state is the one that I have, which is a mono version, and it's the least rare. Basically, they're worth more based on how well they were peeled. I feel like that one was peeled pretty well.
Crazy, yeah.
And they're the most common and the least valuable, but yeah, what they're worth varies on how well they were peeled. And I have some other facts here, but anyways, I don't want to take up too much more time, but
Thank you.
yeah, like I just remember like traveling as a kid with my father to we used to go school shopping in like Massachusetts every summer, and we would always stop at the music stores in the area, and we'd do it off season too, but we would always go to the music stores together and collect together.
Thanks for straightening me out.
It's kind of interesting though, because I have a lot of the records also from the UK, and you notice that there's more songs on those
some of the songs
records.
are
Oh, this
different
is
too.
definitely
And they're
3,
different
4
because in
albums.
the United States, for the radio, they wanted you to cut it under like 2.5 minutes, I believe.
Yeah.
That
So-
song, I Gotta Get You Into My Life, actually showed up on 2 different albums, and there's
Really?
there are 2 different versions.
Yeah, there's
Yeah.
a lot of different
Yeah.
versions of some of the songs. Cool.
That one, but do you actually have one of the original of the White Album?
Oh yeah.
The song with 2 versions?
Yeah.
Yeah. We had friends that went up to Canada and they were able to buy, that's the White Album. What it really was John and Yoko standing naked.
Yeah.
On the cover, and Song in 2 Versions was the name of the White Album.
I believe.
Yeah, and I had friends that actually went to Canada and they brought back, you could buy just the page and wrap your White Album with.
Yeah, I have a copy of that image actually that my mother-in-law got at a flea market for me. It was like, I think it was on maybe on the cover of the Rolling Stone at some point. I don't know if it.
The magazine?
I believe
Yeah, it was.
so.
Yes, it was.
So I have
Yeah.
basically that version of it. I can't say I have the record. I'm gonna have to go home and look, and I have so many records.
Well, Lexi will be rich someday.
Lexi
When she's
inherited
60.
all the seat. My dad he gifted those for my birthday when I was 18, and then from then on, he collected all the CDs, which some of the CDs are very rare at this point too. And when my dad passed, she got the CD collection. So
Sarah, I see your father played the bass and did vocals.
that's because he loved Paul McCartney.
Did you ever hear him in action?
Oh yes.
Oh,
You did.
Oh yes. He was heard him in action.
Oh yeah, we
Okay.
were at the parties.
Yeah.
I just thought he was really nice looking.
He's a rock.
He was
Oh,
very
he
nice
was very
looking.
nice looking.
A
He
lot of
died
people
much
said he looked
later.
like between like Bon Jovi and John Mellencamp.
Yeah.
I like John Bon Jovi. I'll go with them.
That was a
Yeah.
good mix, actually. You're right.
Yeah.
Yeah, my mom bought the butcher sleeve. So my mom was a stay-at-home mom, and she ran a daycare, and you know, she'd make money from that, and it always just landed on the sideboard, and that was Dad's money, I guess. But
Nice.
somehow she was able to hide cash and save that money.
Mm-hmm.
She purchased that for him when I was about 11 or 12. And I think she paid between $250 and $350 for it, which was a lot of money.
It
for her.
is a lot of money.
It was.
Yeah.
Actually,
They had to
I
win.
actually knew a man that, as a young man, he was a stagehand at Shea Stadium when they played.
Oh my gosh.
And he said, yeah, you could hear all the screaming, but on stage, you could hear the music. And he said, and he was a musician himself, and he said, he never heard a band so tight, playing live.
That's what everybody said about the Beatles.
I got to see Paul McCartney live
Yeah.
3 years ago.
Yeah, when he
was,
walked up with the cane, right?
No, he was actually coming around.
No, I'm kidding.
No, but I was
He's coming again this year.
I was excited. I saw him at Fenway, and it was on my mom's birthday. It was June 8th that year, so he sang birthday, and I got to sing it to my
Nice.
mom.
Nice.
Have you
Cool.
heard the latest one? Now and Then.
Oh, that's not super new. but-
It's very Beatles. Well, the latest took a year or two. At
Yeah,
most.
it's not super new. But
And
yeah.
he sings that on stage now and has
Yeah.
the others behind.
It's really cool. Yeah, he a lot of the songs he did, he had images of John Lennon. I think it was really cool. It was
I saw that on Facebook.
yeah, and the one with the marching bands. Somebody's knocking at the door.
Oh yeah.
That one, that was super cool. They had the marching band there, and then I think Here Today, he sang that
Mm-hmm.
with John Lennon on the screen.
Nice.
Yeah.
Well, that was interesting.
Very nice.
So,
Thank you.
I
Think of my
have to go to a
outfit.
soccer game.
Uh-oh.
In Bangor.
Let
Now
it
you know
not
why I
rain.
don't throw any of those things away.
They gotta get it in.
So I got a ton of records.
Thanks,
Yeah.
Debbie.
I'll tell you what,
Debbie.
until I got a house, they were really hard to take care of and carry around. My dad can't collect something little. It's crazy.
Well, I got one quick story.
Yes.
Just recently on Facebook, someone posted here from town, I guess, a gravestone in Hadley, Massachusetts. Is that somebody who heard this? Yeah, and they were talking about that. And what I found interesting was that was part of the Deerfield raids in the early 1700s in Massachusetts. And what I did not know is that it was a lot of the eastern Indian tribes during that King Philip's War that were actually part of that party. Nipmucks, the Wampanoags, and I am a descendant of a Wampanoag, of Nipmuc. And I said, oh wow, I didn't know they were a warring nation, but I guess they joined in the foray. But I thought that was interesting.
Wampanoags are from Massachusetts,
Yeah,
right?
and so are the Nipmuc,
Canton,
Massachusetts.
Mass, in that area.
Yeah, along the Cape,
Yeah.
they were the ones that the Pilgrims first hooked up with there, I guess.
Yeah, I have a
And the
close
Nipmucs were
friend
south
who's a
of them.
Wampanoag. Yeah, nice.
Do we have any other stories or things to show? Well, if not, we will have our refreshments. And in about 15 minutes or so, we'll have our Christmas.
Ralph, what do you have to say?
That's all right now. I couldn't find it. I was just gonna bring another one of my autograph books. I know we have a couple here where we've done a program on them. Now I got one with a lot of my Staples ancestors' names in it and stuff, but I couldn't come across it quickly today, it stashed away somewhere. And I thought of bringing that portrait of Willard Mudgett, because he's a well-known famous person. It was just too big, I didn't want a chance to carry it up to here. But, we'll do a program on him sometime. The other programs, that my ancestors have the books here. I recommend Alexander Staples' journal, you know,
Yeah.
the 1850s diary there, you know. What? Question, I was in, it was Saturday, I guess, yes, yeah, with Marie's sister, trying to get, she wanted a copy of the Letters of a New England Coaster. I thought we had a whole, the Letters of a New England Coaster in the book.
I have not
I
seen
I
a
thought we bought
box
a-
of them.
I thought we bought a whole mess and we printed it, we just
If there are a whole lot, they are underneath a bunch of boxes of other books. And I
Okay.
thought we had checked all the boxes to
Okay.
inventory.
Everything.
Yeah.
In that little closet?
Yeah,
Oh, yeah, we went through that.
and
I
also
opened it.
in the closet in Bob Brooks's room. And I don't remember seeing any except the ones that, there are two, I think, that are on the shelf in the showroom.
What's the name of the book?
Letters of a New England
Oh,
Coaster.
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I had one.
All right, I'm shutting this off. That was fun.
Yes, thank you.
Well done.